Here's what's coming up on today's show.
You have to get one thing straight. This is not about what's in it for me when mom and dad pass away.
Correct.
It is not that at all. The goal of this conversation is to create an understanding so that everybody can responsibly honor the parents' vision for their future.
Welcome to the Income for Life Show. If you're looking for some common sense retirement planning ideas and want to hear how we make the complex financial world simple, then listen up so you can learn how you can stay retired. The Income for Life Show is powered by Folds of Honor, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to providing educational scholarships to the families of America's fallen and disabled service members. Now, here are your hosts, Matt Nelson and Nick Schilling.
Welcome to the Income for Life Show with your hosts, Matt and Nick, on a beautiful, sunny, mid-December day. Nick, how are you doing today? How was your Thanksgiving?
Doing fantastic. It's kind of ridiculous here in Kansas right now that we're talking first couple weeks of December. The year has seemed to drag on forever and went by pretty quickly. All at the same time, which is a unique 2020 year. But it's also here in Kansas, and it is going to be mid-60s and sunny for the vast majority of this week. It honestly doesn't feel like it's holiday season.
It's December.
Yep.
We're in the first week of December, the end of the first week.
Yep.
And it's supposed to be 70 degrees and sunny on Wednesday. And anybody that has ever spent any time during the winter time in the Midwest will understand completely that this is not normal. So we're going to take advantage of it as much as we can.
We're going to try to, but it's different. I know friends that have taken this because of the pandemic and they're at home, maybe working from home, where they've had their Christmas tree up since like September.
Right.
Now, but my wife and I were just talking of, I don't know if we're going to put one up. Because it's like 90 degrees, it feels like here. It doesn't feel like the holiday season. We'll see what the kids want to do.
Snow.
We'll see what the kids want to do.
Yeah, there's no snow, no even attempt at snow. Nothing on the radar at all. And here we are, Christmas holiday and Christmas trees and Christmas lights and all this, and it's 60 degrees.
Correct.
And we don't live in Arizona.
Correct.
So it's a weird time. It's needless to say, it is a very weird time, this 2020 year with COVID and the economy and everything that we've always talked about, Nick, on all of our shows is maybe some people are saying it's kind of coming to an end because we're getting to the end of the year, and other people are saying, well, what's going to change? We're going to have 2021 that everything is going to stay kind of as it is. So everybody's, if you're half full or half empty in your glass, whatever it might be.
Correct.
Which kind of brings us to what we're going to be discussing on today's Income for Life show. And this is a time of the year where you're not able to get with all of your family like maybe you were expecting to with maybe it's all virtual now, or maybe, you can't get away from your family. That could be another thing too. With the virus, everybody is kind of on a lockdown sort of a mentality. But we are still at this time of the year, Nick, where the family members are going to at least try to get together in some capacity, right? So this very well might be a good time, and usually it is at this time of the year whenever you have your family getting together to maybe have some of those sadly awkward or stressful conversations about the plan for mom and dad, the plan for grandma and grandpa. Since now, maybe sister made it back from Scottsdale and she's only there a couple times of the year, or brother is now back from Denver, or whatever it might be. Now the family's together, and now might be a good time, and for a lot of people this is the good time to start having these conversations with mom and dad, with grandma and grandpa, about what they want to have happen with their retirement, with their health, with their whatever, so that all those people are together. So today's show, Nick, we're going to be discussing how to have some of those holiday conversations that maybe no one wants to have. And we're going to go through some ideas and some statistics here, and we're going to go through some options that we feel are important for everybody to know. But before we jump into doing that, Nick, it's this conversation, we just kind of want to preface it, is that it's going to be this is a difficult show today. It's a difficult mentality to have to go down this path. And I know, Nick, I have done this. You have done this. A lot of people that we know have done this. But also on the flip side of that, we know a lot of people that have never approached this sort of a conversation with their mother and father or their grandmother and grandfather. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, agree 100%. And it's an awkward conversation. Not only have we had it, Matt, as being part of our family and our extended family, but also have helped our clients stage and frame this conversation because the importance of it is so paramount. You have to have this. We always talk about the 3 C's. In you as a couple having to get down what your 3 C's, checkbooks, calendars, and clocks are for your retirement plan. But the details of that and the tentacles of that spread a lot further than just that plan. There's also kind of the 4th C, as we talk about it, Matt, which is the conversation. How do we have the conversation about what the 3 C's are and what we want those to be going forward? And lots of times, like you said, Matt, the holiday season is an opportune time because people will be, if it's getting together like in previous years, if you're in an area or your family can do that, fantastic. If you're not, and people won't be getting together, but you're going to be having Zoom calls and phone calls and lots of different stuff. There's different times and ways that you can at least start to broach this conversation, start to frame out how you're going to have the conversation of what does retirement and finances and all of those things look like for everybody involved. And if you're the adult child having the conversation up to your retired parents, or you're the parents that are retiring or retired and want to have that conversation with the rest of your family, it's never an easy thing to bring up. Hopefully today we'll at least lay out some of the framework to help have that discussion and also give you peace of mind that you're not alone.
That's
no matter
the
which
big one.
No matter which side if you've had it, great. If you haven't, great. We can give you some ideas, but you're not alone.
Nick, and that is so important for so many people to know, because this 4th C that we are going to be discussing here today, which is the conversation, right? If you've ever been a fan of the Income for Life show, you've listened to our podcasts all over Spotify and Apple and on our website, of course, at incomeforlife.org. We are always talking about those 3 C's. The checkbook, the calendar, and the clock. The checkbook, how much money is in there? The calendar, what day of the month is more money coming in there? And the clock is how long will that last? But what we're going to be talking about today, and you set that up perfectly, Nick, is conversation. You need to have this conversation with your family. And you're not alone. And I think that is such an important thing for people to understand is you are not alone in not having this conversation or having it feel awkward or having it being stressful or sad or whatever it might be, whatever emotion.
Correct.
You are not alone in that. That is a struggle with everybody. So today's conversation about that conversation that no one really wants to have is what we are going to discuss. But it's interesting, Nick, because a lot of financial planners or advisors out there that you and I know very well, and maybe if you're listening and have been to your financial advisor or maybe a workshop or anything like that, this type of a conversation typically doesn't come up. It's usually more on the lines of the happy, feel-good retirement stories. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, and that happens with the conversation with a financial advisor or without. Typically, even when we start framing up what this conversation, the retirement extended family conversation could look like, it stays super high level, really superficial. We never get into what the detail is. And typically when we say high level and superficial, it is people talking about, or financial advisors having the conversation with you of, what type of retirement lifestyle do you want to have, Matt?
And it's always rosy.
Yes.
It's always nice.
It's broken into 5 or 10 different things from,
right.
Do you want to travel? Or, Matt, we got a list down that we just wrote down, but Matt, you want to?
Yeah. And some of these conversations that we often hear with financial advisors that are talking to their clients, or maybe the first time you sit down with that said person and you're going through a worksheet, they're trying to get to know you.
The discovery.
It's a discovery time. And then they start asking you kind of the high 10,000-foot view questions, but they're coming from a place of just wonderful, right?
Yep.
And some of the...
What are your goals and aspirations?
What are the goals? What do you want to do? And we jotted down a few of some of the things that maybe you've heard, but we have absolutely heard financial advisors talk to people like, do you want to have one house here and one house there, right? Do you want to have that summer home, right?
Correct.
That's one of them. Or the other one is called the RV life. Do you want to travel all over the country when you retire, right? Another one that we've heard is called the front porch. And that's just where you just want to kick back on that front porch and watch the sunset go down every single night.
You live where you want to live, but you want to have the easy breezy lifestyle.
You got it. And maybe you want to live in a college town. That's a pretty popular one because you went to school there.
If you're from the Midwest like here, maybe you want to go further south and you want to be closer where the weather's perfect and all that kind of stuff in Florida or Arizona, and you just want to get out of the cold and be warm. And
you want to go where there's always some younger people and activity and stuff.
Great. Yep.
And then obviously Florida is a big one. Everybody, hey, you're going to move to Florida, right? So you want to go to the Villages or whatever it might be.
Correct.
Or the one that you often hear is, you're going to go live on that golf course, right? So we're going to set up this retirement plan so you can go live on that golf course. And then the last one is, what is your passion? What do you want to do in your golden years? We hear all these things, right, Nick? And
they're kind of labeled as just, what do you want your retirement lifestyle to be?
Right.
And it's always these just fantastic choices. The 6 or 7 that we just named there, it's kind of which best fit your personality.
Right.
And that's always great. And somebody might fall into, well, my wife and I like to golf, and maybe we just want to buy a house on a course and golf every day if the weather fits, and that's how we want to live. But we don't really get down into the nuts and bolts and details of how to actually either do that, make that happen, or how that's going to have ramifications and ripples through the rest of the family plan.
You're exactly right. And the reason that we are bringing up some of these rosy topics that some people will, of course, try to express to you when they're planning for your retirement is that twofold. Number one, that's not always going to be realistic.
Correct.
And number two, it may not be anywhere close to the goals that you are actually wanting to do that maybe you're doing right now. So we're going to go through some statistics of some more realistic stuff here, Nick, and you're going to go through some information from a study that we have here. But sometimes family has to be the main focus. And it sounds weird, right? Because a lot of times when it comes to retirement, it's I can finally do stuff for me, right? I can finally we can go travel and do that trip. The kids are grown, everybody's good, and now we can spend time and money on ourselves, right?
Correct. It's what you saved for.
But that doesn't always work that way.
Correct.
So I know, Nick, you have some interesting information that you're going to share right now. So jump into what you have.
Well, when we talk about that, you're not alone. And when we get into, the different retirement lifestyles and that conversation that many of us have when we read articles or talk to financial advisors, but what really happens is we're not having that deeper conversation. Over a third of people over the age of 50 haven't even had what type of retirement lifestyle conversation they want to have with their spouse. So let me repeat that. We just walked through kind of very high level golf course or Florida or 2 homes or front porch or RV, all these very generic things. Over a third of people that are over the age of 50, meaning they're planning for retirement.
They're close. They're almost there.
They've saved a significant amount in their nest egg, their 401ks and all that kind of stuff. They're looking at the finish line is getting close and hopefully creeping ever closer to what that retirement's going to look like. Over a third of them haven't had this conversation with their spouse.
With their own spouse.
Less than half of them have had the conversation with their larger family, their kids and other loved ones that need to be a part of that. The lack of this conversation, when we stay high level, we're not getting into the functioning stuff that you were just talking about, Matt, that you need to be able to do, that what retirement's actually going to be.
And think about that, because you just stated two very powerful numbers, two percentages.
Yep.
A third have not even had this conversation with their spouse.
Correct.
And half, 50%, have not had this conversation with their, whoever that would be in their immediate family.
Yep.
So there's so many dynamics that could be coming into play.
Correct.
That so many people are just, they're not either thinking about, or maybe it's just something you don't want to talk about because everybody knows that it's going to be an awkward conversation. But you don't want to get to that place where you're having these conversations now out of necessity.
Correct.
You want to be having these conversations while everybody can communicate properly and be able to have the time to do the steps that people are wanting, wouldn't you think?
You need to be able to, and we talk about this all the time, you need to be able to have the conversation so that you can create the plan and that you have enough time and everybody is aware of what that plan is so they can walk the steps of that plan when anything ever happens. If you don't have that plan and that plan is not communicated with your significant other, the rest of your family that's going to have anything, and when we say these things like if something happens, that could be a death, that could be an illness, that could be just as you get older and we're talking about how are you going to have some sort of longer term care for somebody in need type of plan, nursing home, assisted living, somebody else in the family helping out. If we don't have that stuff laid out and really communicated, then we're playing catch up. Then something happens and we're scrambling and we're looking through and there's no plan to follow. We haven't had the conversation. We're just kind of running around with our heads cut off.
Right. And with that, where you just explained some of the God forbid medical or the death, yes, you absolutely have to have that conversation. But another conversation that you have to have would maybe be on the lines of something better. What if mom and dad did want to move somewhere? What if mom and dad wanted to move to Florida or they wanted to move somewhere?
Correct.
But where they are now is helping one of the children. Right? Maybe where they are right now, Sue is living with mom and dad for the time being, or there's some sort of a family dynamic there that is not a medical thing like we were just talking about, but it needs to be discussed.
Correct.
So there's so many things that need to be discussed on this as you go.
And that's why each of these conversations within this framework that we're going to kind of lay out and discuss, not only today, but ongoing as well as we help people do this, but each one of these conversations is unique. It's just having an understanding as to what we currently want to do, who we need to communicate that with, and then having a framework by which we're going to have that discussion.
Absolutely.
And every family has its own unique dynamics, and we need to be able to walk through. There's some consistencies that need to be taken care of that we can walk through, and we'll touch on. And there's some consistencies in the dynamics of families as to why they might not be having this conversation.
Absolutely. And big.
We'll go through some statistics in a little bit as to maybe some of the things that kind of inhibit or people are apprehensive as to why they're not having this conversation, and then hopefully give you some tactics to be able to step over those hurdles.
Absolutely. And the reason that we're bringing this up today, as we discussed earlier in the show, is because this is a time when there's more likely to have the family together, right? Yes. I know that 2020 is weird, and with COVID and everything, it's a mess, and it's kind of a crapshoot on who you're going to be able to be with and who you're not. But typically, holiday time is when family gets together. When family gets together, maybe that's a good time to take an hour or two in one of the evenings and have these conversations with mom and dad or grandma and grandpa to make sure that everybody is on the same page. And Nick, I know that so many of our clients have had this conversation with their loved ones, and every single one of them comes back and they say two things. Number one, yes, it was difficult, but we are so happy we did. We are so happy that we got that done. Wouldn't you think?
Correct. It's being able to, it's always one of those awkward things to handle right away in the moment. It's difficult, not just for the people that are trying to organize the conversation, but for everybody involved. But once you're done, it takes that off your shoulders. You're able to, take a sigh and say, now we have a plan. We've communicated that plan. The plan might change, but we've already broached the conversation. Now we can tweak it as we go and really start to communicate with our advisor as to how we want to set this up and what we can do. When we look at this, that initial conversation is tough. And there's a few key things as to barriers that people have noticed and people have communicated that of why they don't have this.
Let's go through those.
And this is unique. So these are from a company called AgeWave that is not a financial company. Basically, they're just thought leaders in how baby boomers have grown up and are retiring and what that means, not only to our overall economy, but to their lifestyle. Conversations that they're having and not having, the impact of them receiving a bunch of money, passing on a bunch of money. How have these things happened and why, and what are some best practices? What they found out was there's some key barriers to this key conversation, this really critical conversation that we're having. And here's a few of them that go. 24% want to avoid family conflict. So they don't want to start really digging into what their plan is for retirement or their finances because they know it's just going to cause conflict. If it's with their parents or with their children, it's going to cause some conflict in the family. And almost a quarter of people, that's the main reason.
And I bet that's low, to be honest with you. That quarter,
correct.
I would even maybe go out on a limb and say that's even maybe a low number because that's a tough thing to do.
I would guess that is included in every other one of them as well.
Absolutely.
So it's only for a quarter of them that just listed that. But the awkwardness and avoidance of the conflict is probably inherent with every one of them. Yes.
Well, and it's important to go into this conversation with the family and the siblings and the moms and the dads. You have to get one thing straight. This is not about what's in it for me when mom and dad pass away.
Correct.
It is not that at all. The goal of this conversation is to create an understanding so that everybody can responsibly honor the parents' vision for their future.
Love the way you put that.
And that is the key to this conversation. So if you need to have that first wave conversation with just the siblings and say, hey, we need to talk to mom and dad while we're out there, right? Whenever we go out there for that Thanksgiving, we should probably sit down and have a conversation with mom and dad.
Correct.
Because the last thing you want to do is spring this mid-feast.
Correct.
While you're
Good
sitting
point.
there having dinner and say, oh, by the way, I was thinking about something.
Correct.
So you want to have some of that conversation ahead of time and even let mom and dad, grandma and grandpa know, hey, we're coming out there.
Or the kids, if you're the retiree.
Whoever it is, and just say, hey, we should probably talk about this while we're all together. Is that okay?
Agree completely.
And just kind of, go approach it gently.
Correct.
There's nothing wrong with that. Approach that conversation gently. So I know you got a couple of other numbers here, Nick. Let's dive into them.
And they fit in exactly to what we're talking about, Matt. So if a quarter of people are avoiding it just for conflict's sake, 17% avoid it because they don't really think the conversation they're going to have will help.
Ooh, so there's a good one.
It is a good one, I think, because they're thinking, why go through the difficulty, make it awkward, possibly have some conflict and have some...
And not do anything.
People get upset if it's not going to help anyways, if nobody's going to follow the plan. But we got to get that out of, it's not just a conversation for conversation's sake. What we want to help you do is a conversation to enact a plan. And when we have that plan and you have some people that are in that plan with you, they can help your family maneuver through that. Another one is 13% of people don't want everybody in the family to know how much money they have or don't have. So they just don't want to dig into the specifics of the financials. Because that can, as we talked about earlier in the show, it's an awkward conversation. And if you don't talk about money in the first 65 years of your life, it's really hard to have that conversation now.
Right. That's important.
But part of the plan is how you're going to utilize that money, whatever it is, in retirement to create your 3 C's. What we want the 4th C to be is why we're not having the conversation, but why we need to have the conversation.
Absolutely. And on that topic right there that you were just talking about, it's important for the kids and the grandkids mainly to understand that this is their decision. This is mom and dad's decision. This is grandma and grandpa's decision. We can all have this conversation, and of course, we want to approach it gently like we discussed and everything, but at the end of the day, this is mom and dad's blood, sweat, and tears that they've accumulated over their entire lifetime.
Correct.
So, of course, if there is a way that they want to pass on assets to children, grandchildren, wherever it might be, that's wonderful. That is great. But we also have the conversation a lot of times where the kids will say, Mom, Dad, I love you for that. Thank you for thinking of us with this. But our goal is to make sure that you're good. We want to make sure that you
Great point.
are set. We're fine. We can manage. We're adults. We're big people. We'll take care of ourselves. You take care of you. That needs to be the priority. So we often hear that as these conversations in this 4th C that we're talking about. In that conversation, a lot of times and you and I, Nick, with our families are the same way. Mom, Dad, take care of you. Make sure that you're taken care of first. Whatever we can do on this back end to make sure that you are taken care of first, great.
Correct.
And then after that, let's get a plan in place for what you want to do after. Agreed?
Agree. And in most circumstances, again, every family dynamic is unique, but in so many circumstances, it is simply just we want to be able to support mom and dad in whatever lifestyle they want to have. We just want to be able to communicate that plan so that everybody's on the same page. But the last one, and I think it leads into what we're talking about here, Matt, is over 10% of people just don't know how to start the conversation. They avoid having this conversation, not because they're worried about conflict. They maybe trust their family. They just don't know how to broach it. They don't know how to set it up, talk to the people who should even be in the conversation, and they don't know how to start to have that conversation, when to do it and how to do it. And I think we've talked about a few things now, but you started it out with first, Matt, that you mentioned just a couple minutes ago, is what should that conversation be based around? The focus of mom and dad or the retirees that the initiation is, and what is the primary purpose of the conversation? Right. To make sure that the plan, the 3 C's are taken care of, documented, and everybody's working off the same sheet music.
Right. And it's important for everybody that's listening right now, and I just want to make sure that as we go through this, right now I'm talking to the people that are listening. Because Nick, you and I, we are professionals in this arena. We do retirement planning. Correct. We are comfortable having these types of conversations with our clients, with the families of our clients. We're comfortable having this conversation with our own family because we do it so often for our clients. So Nick and I are in a little bit different boat when it comes to be able to have this sort of a conversation, whereas somebody else could be saying, there's no way in hell I would want to have that conversation Correct. With my family or whatever it might be. So just understand that you don't have to limit this to just one conversation, one meeting. This could be several, and you approach this however you think you need to approach it. And again, the only reason we're bringing this up now around the holiday times is just because this is where a lot of times we hear that this is the time that our clients do this.
Correct.
And so, I understand that what we are saying and some of the things that we are going through here today, Nick, we're rattling these things off. And we don't by any means want to make this sound like that this should be an easy conversation. No. This is a difficult conversation that you will have normally.
And more than likely, it's conversations.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
The difficulty, everything changes, and we want you to have this as early as possible so that things can change and move and react, and we just communicate those changes with everybody else. But the toughest part, as the stats that I just walked through, is the initial conversation.
You bet.
Once it's broached in the beginning, the dynamic, the ongoing conversations are a lot easier. So I just want to name a few of the ways that we can have some conversation starters to help people start to think about.
Oh, perfect. Perfect.
What this would look like. And again, it doesn't have to get into so much detail, but it's just kind of 5 high-level things that they need to figure out amongst themselves, spouses, partners, and then their extended family of who should be in there. First one, where do you want to live? So we talked about, Matt, a lot of those things that this is where it kind of goes when you're talking that 30,000-foot view.
Right.
The utopia of RV lifestyle, golf course or Florida. Mm-hmm. That's the easy stuff. But then getting into more detail. How are we going to actually do that? Number 2, what are your children's roles and responsibilities in this overall plan? Do you have an executor of your will or estate or a power of attorney? Starting to label out some of these things that help everybody understand what's going to happen as you guys go through your retirement lifestyle. So depending on how many kids you have and what that is, maybe some kids are local where they're a lot easier to do, but understanding and labeling out what your kids' responsibilities are.
And let me jump in there real quick, Nick, because there's a lot of times where the kids don't even know that mom and dad have those professionals in their life.
Correct.
So knowing that you have a team, right? Knowing that you have people, that this is what they do, right? For example, that trust attorney, right?
Correct.
Or that executor like you were talking about, or whoever it might be that is a professional in this arena, that maybe the kids thought, we're going to have to deal with all this all by ourselves. They're like, well, no, you don't have to, because we have so-and-so that is going to be able to help you along the way. Oh, okay, well, we didn't know that there was a so-and-so.
Great point. And I think adding on to this one, not only what your children's roles and responsibilities are, but who else is helping you. Letting the kids know all the other players in this, from your financial planner, your tax person, your attorney, all of those things that those kids need to understand of who to contact and all the people that are helping you enact the plan, the 3 C's that you have.
And we even have a list, and we have a PDF that is in this podcast, that if you're listening on incomeforlife.org, there's going to be a link that is on here that is a list that we have prepared, which is who to contact in these sort of events. If grandma or grandpa pass away, everybody typically, they'll notify friends and family, right? They'll let everybody know if grandpa passed away. I understand that. But a lot of people don't realize maybe we need to get a hold of the post office. Maybe we need to get a hold of that prepaid funeral bond. We need to get a hold of these other people, that gym membership, something that's hitting that account on an EFT.
Good point.
Every single month, that people don't realize it for 6 or 7 months.
So if it's not communicated, nobody knows.
Nobody knows. So we have a PDF, and we would recommend that everybody listening jump on incomeforlife.org and go to this podcast and print this off. Make a copy of it and get it to all of your family members or mom and dad or whatever, because it's a list of about 15 or 20 professional people that could be in your life. You won't have every one of these in your life. But for example, I'm just looking at the list, a human resource contact. Maybe if you're still working.
For your company, if you got a pension or a retirement plan there.
Exactly. An accountant, of course. Some of these are pretty self-explanatory. If you have a life insurance agent, okay. But what about the Department of Veteran Affairs?
Yeah.
You need to let those people know. The electoral offices, legal counsel, your home and auto insurance people. Some of these, any clubs or associations that you're involved with, you need to have access to these people.
And you need to have it documented in one place where when you're communicating with your children, or if the children are communicating up to the retirees, where is that document at? Where are these names and numbers at? In a file cabinet, a safety deposit box, wherever. And make sure that everybody's aware of it. So you can just go grab that document, start to walk down the list, and make sure everybody's aware.
And this document is right on this podcast at incomeforlife.org. So all you have to do is just go click on it and print it. It's a PDF, and there's plenty of space in there where you can write names and phone numbers of these professional people that would need to be notified.
Unfortunately, most people don't have this. It's so easy, but most people don't have it, and it just causes more confusion. So use the one that we got. You can put it on a piece of paper if you want to, but we got a simple format that's nice and easy to use.
Absolutely.
So you might as well do that one. The third one that we're talking about here, unfortunately, is happening more and more often now. But it gets into maybe mom and dad are supporting one of their children longer in life. Everything costs more. People are in college longer and in higher education longer. Maybe mom and dad are helping support maybe somebody in their life a little bit longer than what was normal 30 years ago. So this says that 60% of parents admit to supporting one of their children that's 18 to 30 in their lifestyle.
Okay. How many? 60?
60%. More than 60% of families have a child that once they turn 18, they're considered an adult. But between that 18 and 30 year mark, the parents are still helping support some of their things. And if that's not discussed with the rest of the family, and that's not discussed with your financial advisor and all the people that you mentioned there, Matt, then maybe some of those things, if something changes in their life, that will maybe be left by the wayside or not communicated in the way that there's reasons why you're doing that and there's things that you want to keep. So everybody's got to know what's going on and why.
And everybody wants to be able to take care of their kids, and everybody wants to be able to help their kids no matter their age.
Yep.
It doesn't matter. Your kids are your kids. I don't care if they're 3 or 33, they're still your children.
Correct.
So you always want to be able to help them in any way you can. And there are situations where maybe one of those kids needs a little bit more help than the others.
Correct.
It happens all the time. So that conversation needs to happen, because instead of just always talking about the RV life or the golf course life or
Correct.
whatever it might be, you also need to have that conversation with everybody of, well, if something were to happen to us, what are we going to do?
Yep.
What are we going to do here? Because here's what we're doing now. How does that work?
Sisters got to know that maybe mom and dad are helping brother with some of the college expenses or their loans or something like that they feel very comfortable doing, but not everybody's aware. And some of these a little bit more intimate and awkward things got to be discussed. And this is one where, let's say 30 years ago, it didn't happen as often. Now, because of the way that lifestyles are, the way that education is, the expense of it, how good of jobs people get out of college and the debt that they acquire to do it, this is becoming more and more common.
And I would maybe even go out on a limb and say that number may be on the rise. I bet.
Oh, I think 60% is going to get higher.
It's
Yes.
going to eventually get higher. Good point.
Yeah. So we'll go through the first three again. 1, where are you going to live? What does that lifestyle look like? Everybody's got to kind of know if you got that plan. 2, what are the roles and responsibilities of your children, and letting your children know, because Matt made a great point here, who the other players are in your life. Documenting that, which we got the document on the website, documenting that, having it in a secure place. 3, what's the financial security of all the children and people that you want to support? Let everybody know if you're supporting somebody in a little bit different way, because once it's out there, it's out there. Everybody can deal with it, but it's broaching that conversation and making sure that everybody's aware. Last 2. Number 4, have you provided for long-term care health?
That's huge. That's the big one.
Have you taken care of, as people live longer and retirement resources get stretched longer and longer? Longevity is out there. What are we going to do? Have we taken into account what that long-term care solution, assisted living, nursing home, even just family members taking care of family members and moving in, what does that conversation look like? What are the financial resources that you've set aside to be able to do that? How is everybody walking through that plan?
And Merrill Lynch has a very interesting study on that, right into exactly what you were talking about, because that conversation is so awkward, right?
Yep.
But Merrill Lynch did a study, and they found that 2/3 of older adults have done nothing to avoid staying with family if they can't live on their own anymore. They've done nothing. 2/3, so 66% of people out there have done nothing. Nada, zero, nothing, to avoid staying with family if they can't live on their own. That's a perfect example of that conversation that we're talking about.
Or the lack thereof that
the
conversation.
lack thereof conversation. Yep. So that is something that you absolutely have to discuss.
Moving in with family can be a great option if that situation fits what you want to do and you have the helpers and the resources to be able to do it. That's definitely an option. Other options have to be taken into account as well for different people, and those options cost money or take resources, and we got to figure out what you want to do and how we're going to help pay for that, because the last thing you want to do is be a burden. If you are going to move in with family, last thing you want to do is be a burden. And if you're going to go another place, if it's a nursing home or assisted living or anything like that, those things are not cheap and they're not getting any less expensive.
And it's important for everybody that is listening right now, because the top 3 concerns of retirees today, number one is one we talk about all the time, which is outliving your income. That's the number one concern, is outliving their income. The number 2 is they want to have enough money just for basic expenses.
Yep.
But the third is they don't want to be a burden on friends and family. That's the third. So when you're having these conversations and, they're awkward or whatever, it's all happening and you're trying to put all these plans together, it's so important for people, again, to understand, A, you're not alone in this conversation.
Yep.
People all over the country are feeling the exact same way you are. And B, there are professionals out there that's their job. That's what they do, is to help you with this process.
Great point. Yeah, really good point. The last one that I want to touch on of kind of conversation starters that are just one of the key things that, Matt, we see people either having difficulty talking about or not talking about, which then causes difficulty when something happens. That last one is, what are their thoughts and what are their plans for giving? Philanthropy. If they pass away or they're no longer kind of in charge of what they want to do, if they have goals and aspirations to give to the church or give to charity, and that's not documented and communicated with the rest of the family, lots of times those things don't happen.
Absolutely.
It's one of those things that, well, maybe the kids aren't even aware, so they don't continue that giving. If that's not in the will, who's going to know that they wanted to give to the church or give to some other great charity that they maybe wanted to do? We got to document those things so that we can make sure that those wishes are taken care of. And I know that's not that big of a deal to have that conversation, but not having it, you're not going to get those wishes executed.
Yeah, none of it will happen unless a conversation
None of it will happen. So what we want to be able to do is kind of frame up some of the key conversation starters that will help people. We can get as deep as we want to get, but even just broaching these 5 topics. Where do you want to live? What you want that retirement lifestyle to look like? What are the roles and responsibilities of the kids and everybody else involved? Is there anybody's financial security that we need to talk about more specifically? Are mom and dad supporting one of the dependents a little bit more than somebody else? And we got to have that, what they're doing and why. Long-term care, massive issue, not going away. Everybody's living longer and the expenses
are going through the roof.
They can literally wipe out the savings that families have tried so hard to build up a nest egg, and maybe they want to give or use in certain ways, and long-term care can eat them up.
And now they can't.
And that type of giving can go away because these costs can eat into them so frequently. And then philanthropy or giving, the things that you care about, things that you want to help out within your plan, making sure that everybody's aware of those.
And it's so important as we're going through this topic today to not make it sound all gloom and doom, because This is a very kind of a downer show today. I mean, it's a tough conversation that maybe people are listening to right now, and it's like, oh man, I mean, Matt and Nick are usually always talking about a little bit more upbeat stuff.
Correct.
And today they're kind of bringing me down a little bit. But here's what will happen. And Nick, you've done it with your family, and I have done it with my family. Once that elephant in the room is addressed, and everybody is on the same page of we need to have this conversation, and then that conversation opens up and everybody starts talking about it. You have that, oh man, I'm glad we did that, and so now everybody knows what is expected, how
Correct.
to go about it, when's going to be the next conversation, whatever the scenario might be. So if you are listening today and you're like, well, man, I think we do need to have that conversation with my family or whoever it might be. Or if you are that retiree and saying, boy, we need to have that conversation with the kids.
Correct.
Then maybe we gave you a little bit of guidance of how to do this. But definitely take advantage of our PDF.
Yes.
Get your hands on that, print that off, and that'll kind of get a starter of the conversation going, don't you think?
Agree. And it's always, we didn't want this conversation to be doom and gloom. It's not about just death and what happens after that. It comes down to, in our society, we don't really talk about money or politics or religion. They're kind of taboo. Well, finances need to be talked about amongst loved ones. But since it is taboo, how do we have that conversation? Where do we focus the conversation? Where should everybody's hearts and minds be when they're thinking about having that conversation? It can be awkward, but as you just said, Matt, once we broach it, once the initial conversation is had, subsequent ones are so much easier. And then everybody's on the same page and everybody's able to walk through what mom and dad's 3 C's are, so that those things can be taken care of and you're enjoying retirement with the loved ones you've just had that conversation with, not kind of sticking your head in the sand saying, I know we're talking, we're seeing them on holidays, we're doing all these things, but I don't know how to bring up this conversation. I don't know what to do. And the kids are probably thinking the same way. Or mom and dad are thinking the same way if the kids are saying, I got to have this conversation with mom and dad. Everybody's thinking about it. They just don't know how to broach the conversation. They don't know how to start it. And hopefully we gave you some framework to have that conversation. We'll probably talk about this again in the near future as we go, but hopefully it gives you a framework to start the conversation, start to document the conversation with the people that need to have it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And nobody thinks that's easy. Everybody understands that it's going to be a little difficult, but it's something that has to happen. Right. And how that happens is up to you. You know, how that comes up is up to you. Hopefully we just gave you some 10,000-foot guardrails, if you would, of kind of how to start that. But it is something that really does need to happen, and so many people are struggling with it. But as we wrap up today's show, like we always do, whenever we're talking about what has happened in the sports world at the end, I'll tell you one group that is not struggling. Who do you think that group is?
I don't know, Matt. Could it be the Chiefs?
It might be those world champion Kansas City Chiefs.
Could be.
I don't think that they're struggling. I heard a stat today that I think that they are 20-1 over from last year through the playoffs to now. We're 20-1, Nick.
Well,
11-1 this year.
And I don't think anybody really wants to play the Chiefs. You know, with the whole crew that they have, as they get into the playoffs and the playoffs start approaching, they're a team that seems to get better when the times get tougher. They don't want to. Nobody wants to play the Chiefs. They're a pretty dynamic offense. Their defense comes around when it needs to. It's going to be fun to watch them.
And I know there's a lot of talk about these undefeated Pittsburgh Steelers. Okay, good. See you soon. All of our Pittsburgh friends, right? If you're a Pittsburgh Steeler fan, our Chiefs are coming. We'll see you soon. But tell you who hasn't been around is our, of course, Hall of Famer, Mr. Patrick Mahomes. We missed him again today.
Future Hall of Famer.
I'm going to say he already is because I think he's already a lock now. But, you know, he's going to be getting
but he's not there
later.
Yet. He's not there yet.
Yeah,
yep.
But I'm just going to say
you're not a Hall of Famer
in.
till you're a Hall of Famer. I think
There
Michael
it is.
Jordan might have said that.
Yeah, I think he did say that.
Yeah.
Okay, so our future Hall of Famer.
Yep.
Pat Mahomes couldn't join us again today. This would be an interesting conversation with him because who knows if he's had this conversation with his family. But regardless, he has he has an interesting dynamic that is with his family.
He's got a lot of people around him that can hopefully help him with this conversation, and he's got a lot of resources that he needs to document of what he wants to be done with him. So, like everybody else, even young, very wealthy, very celebrity people need to start having these conversations so that everybody in their life understands what they want to have done.
So people from the Pat Mahomes of the world all the way down to the Matt Nicks of the world.
Correct.
We need to have this conversation.
This conversation is valuable for everybody.
Absolutely. So again, Mr. Pat Mahomes, you are welcome on Income for Life anytime you want. If you are on the website, make sure to download our PDF that we have that is attached in this show so you can share that with your loved ones and your friends and family to be able to maybe get some of these conversations started. But until next time, enjoy the rest of your day. Holidays are coming. Hopefully you're making some plans and you're able to get things rolling. Until next time, we appreciate you listening, and bye-bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Income for Life show. If you have any questions about something we talked about today or want to get in touch with the Income for Life team, just give a call to 833-450-3068. That's 833-450-3068. You can also go online to incomeforlife.org and check the description of today's show for any relevant resources and contact information. You can also find the podcast on all major podcasting apps, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and many more locations. The Income for Life show is powered by Folds of Honor, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to providing educational scholarships to the families of America's fallen and disabled service members. For more information, visit foldsofhonor.org. Information provided on today's show is for informational purposes only and does not constitute investment, tax, or legal advice. Information is obtained from sources that are deemed to be reliable, but their accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed. Always consult with a qualified professional before taking any action.